Happy Friday, everybody. Happy Friday. What a week it's been. Hey, Doug, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Jules, thanks for having me.
I think you all know, or if you don't, you should know Doug Miller. Doug, in addition to having spent a long career as a privacy lead at AOL, Yahoo, Verizon, Amazon, now today helps run our ad practices group, but is an executive coach and has deep expertise, not only coaching, but particularly folks in our world of tech and policy and privacy and compliance. So been a great addition to our team. And one of the key things we worry about, in addition to the legal niceties of privacy law and privacy engineering and all that, is the role of the people in these careers. Many of you, hopefully, who are listening. And look, it's a challenging career. On one hand, you work, many of you, at companies, and your job is to facilitate, economic activity and the mission of your organization. But you kind of have a little bit of a different mission sometimes than some of the real revenue generating people, in that you maybe might be compensated based on how well your company does, but your job is to make sure that you don't do the things that are harmful to users. And you're supposed to have a conscience and a level of integrity. And obviously, the company you're joining. And so if you just don't want to work in one particular sector, you think, it's a negative sector, you ought not to be there. But you also work at an organization that makes decisions that you may or may not be pleased with. And every day you may need to decide how loud, how strong, how firm am I about this being the wrong path. And occasionally there are big decisions, and you really can be faced with a moral conundrum. But more often than not, there's lots of little decisions where you're just not happy with the outcome. You're not happy with the direction. Your advice wasn't taken. And when and where you throw yourself, in front of that. And you can't do it all the time because you become Chicken Little, right? Sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes you make decisions and, you say it's fine because you think it's, a level of risk that needs to be accepted because of the practice. And then it becomes a big deal and you were wrong. And then sometimes you're loud and you're firm and, maybe you get overridden and it turns out it wasn't a big deal. And then you lose a lot of credibility. So the real challenge for so many people in this space, certainly for me during my corporate days, wasn't the big conundrum. I'd like to think that, that's where you really make that big decision. And either you say, look, I'm folding and you live with it, or you quit, or you make a fuss. It's the day-to-day stress of exactly how to calibrate your identity as somebody who understands the law, cares about the rules, cares about individuals, and then your mission in the broader organization. So, Doug, we called this session the Great Resignation. Is that how we described it? What did you have in mind when you helped shape that title, and what's the takeaway?
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a play on words. During the pandemic, there was this notion of the Great Resignation, everybody deciding that, they didn't like the job they were in, and so let's move on and resign and go off and do something more meaningful. People were in search of meaning. The way I'm thinking about it in the context of the privacy profession is that, plus people become resigned to the frustration that they encounter. And you just laid it out very well. It's hard to be a privacy professional. It's hard to feel like the organization doesn't want to listen to you all the time. And people become resigned to their fate. They start to check out. They take the path of least resistance instead of engaging in the struggle. And I think this happens in a couple of ways. For individuals, whatever the cause, they check out and they just start to get smaller at the time when they need to get bigger. The challenge becomes, how do you recharge? How do you engage? How do you stay connected to a larger purpose? For teams, I think it's even more poignant, and for leaders, because you're trying to advance a privacy or compliance strategy. It may not be a popular point of view, and you're all gung-ho, and then you read your Sun Tzu, The Art of War or whatever, and you start thinking, well, I've got to pick my battles. I can't upset them today. This is not a good day for me to be raising this. And the natural default is to get smaller again. The path of least resistance, and you can rationalize it as, I don't want to engage, I don't want to upset anybody, we'll take our time, and you end up not being effective at all. This is perfectly normal. It's what humans do. We are naturally conflict avoidant. And the very essence of being a privacy professional is we have to rise to that occasion. And a lot of times I often think that the most important skill for a privacy professional is to be an effective salesperson. And if you talk to somebody who's in professional sales, they'll say, well, you've got to learn to overcome objections. And objections are not rejections. You can't take it personally, that there will be the well, what about this, or we don't have the budget for it, or something like that. And a good salesperson just takes those as challenges to overcome. But it's so natural for people to take that as a rejection and then to become smaller. It's almost a defense mechanism. And so then we don't ask and we don't try, and we convince ourselves that our plans won't work and that the executives will say no. And you mentioned Chicken Little. And I think that's right. You don't want to be regarded as Chicken Little. And I often think of a Mark Twain quote where he said, I've experienced many terrible things in my life, a few of which actually happened.
You know, one of the most popular things we do on the corporate membership side of FPF is provide peer-to-peer opportunities for people to talk to each other, the baseline, compare notes. And the reason I think that's so valuable, yes, it's educational and people learn things, but I think the reason it's valuable is that it can be super hard on so many of the new issues. There are new laws, interpretation isn't clear, new policy concerns. You can read the media or read academic articles, see critics, condemning, complaining, arguing about how bad a new thing is. And that's the thing you're dealing with today. And so you think, well, I don't know. And you talk to peers, and you can help hone your judgment to some degree and understand, what is the norm, right? I mean, some of this is actually hard, and one constant level of stress, and I wonder what your thought is, about this, is that constant sort of uncertainty, right? I mean, they're people with great moral clarity. Everything is evil, and they're against it all, and you see them. It's like, how are you working in the corporate world where you seem to spend all your time yelling about how everything is crooked and corrupt and you live with yourself, right? And it's also perhaps easy if you're maybe on some advocacy side and your job is to fight the power and, decry all the problems, or you're very clearly on a trade group side and your role might be, defending, a particular interest or a point of view. Those people probably sleep well at night because they are convinced of their position. That's who they're paid by, and their arguments, can persuade themselves, and they understand their role. And it just seems like it's really hard when you sort of live in the middle, either intellectually live in the middle, like I do, right? Data has incredible value for society, for the economy, for a whole range of purposes, but okay, there are problems. How do we put the right rules around it? And it's always, benefit risk, and it's always calibrating. What do you think the nonstop stress, of not being an ideologue, of being a pragmatist and a realist does, to people who kind of constantly have to be evaluating legal, moral dilemmas, and then, that have economic impact on others?
I think it does wear on you. Balancing that nuance is tough. I think things like morale on a privacy team are fragile. Your personal enthusiasm, whether you're a junior person on a privacy team or the most senior leader on the privacy team, is fragile. And it's little things that are going to matter. So a couple of points. First, on the benchmarking thing, I think there's a healthy way of doing benchmarking. If you are gathering with a whole bunch of smart professionals and you're looking at what's out there and you're talking about how do we solve this problem? I often think of, a few surgeons getting together because the surgery that they have to do is going to involve a few different systems in the body. And they figure out how to solve this problem that they may never have encountered before. That's a healthy way of solving it. I think there are sometimes people do benchmarking just to see that, well, these folks are not doing anything about this, and so that means that we don't have to either. I think when you're using that as an excuse to not take action for denial or avoidance, very bad. When you're addressing problems and thinking it through in a sensible and pragmatic way, that's really important. I also think that you're right. If you work at an advocacy organization, you're always, your view never has to modulate. You are always on that one side. I think it's fascinating in our line of work. A lot of times you're evaluating risk, but sometimes you're really just sort of pushing these larger ideas that there is some benefit to the organization for the work that you're doing. This is the value proposition that privacy and compliance teams can create. Why this work might actually help the business in some way, that you do good vendor management and you have a sound compliance program. It's easier to bring on partners and vendors and that people can trust you. If you have good data inventory and data mapping, you can facilitate a lot of compliance things. And we have to remind ourselves that we are acting not just within ourselves, but in this larger context of people, that our companies are attaining a certain level of compliance in context of other companies that are as well. One of the values of self-regulation, for example, was always that you could know that the other organizations in this space had done things in a certain way. It was a form of benchmarking. It's really helpful. So I think that is still the value of self-regulation. So there's this mix of risk versus value proposition, and being able to articulate that value proposition in the company is a superpower. There's one fundamental premise here that we jump off from, which is privacy professionals often feel like they are second-class citizens in the organization, that they are somehow at odds or perceived as at odds with the organization's objectives for revenue and stock price and all that. I fundamentally reject this notion. And I would say to all the privacy professionals listening, do not accept that premise. I acknowledge that there are people where you work who will argue that or believe that you are somehow impeding their progress, an obstacle to their innovation and success. But you're not. You're part of the company too. You are there to guide them through this very difficult minefield of these new laws that are proliferating. Sometimes they're written in an ambiguous way. What on earth do? You are guiding. And so the most important thing is to not let yourself be seen as in opposition to the organization's objectives, but to do the repositioning that you are their partner against all of these other things that you need to deal with. And I always think of Walt Whitman, who always said, be curious, not judgmental. It was Whitman and then Ted Lasso. And it's a powerful idea, because when you are perceived as sitting in judgment of people at the company, they don't want to listen to you. If they think you're telling them no, they don't want to listen to you. If you are curious about what they do and you start to position yourself as their partner against these other challenges, then you have much more of a pathway to being listened to.
I feel in some sense, some of this goes in cycles. When we started out, it was very hard to argue that there was this broader human right. It was about consumer privacy. What do you mean we're just targeting ads or building products? It's about the internet and building out the internet and that sort of thing. What's the harm? Too many emails? Come on, what's the harm? Is it bothering you? Why are you so upset about the spam, right? And then I think we entered into a phase where everyone gets it, right? Everyone gets, whether it's social media, whether it's surveillance, whether it's risks about what happens to your search data. 2, 3, 4 years ago, it was a huge learning moment where even if you were the most commercially oriented, exploiter of data, you had to recognize that everybody believed that what information is available about you to companies, to government, to other people, is a huge factor to whether you can flourish as a human, that you could be targeted, discriminated, you could be hurt, and that you had, data as a human right, which used to simply be a very European notion, and we were all about consumers and is it fair, and it's just marketing practice. I think we understood that. I fear that the AI is the national security objective of winning throughout the world, and every company better maximize or be, disintermediated. Although there seems to be an understanding, like we need to worry about the humans here, and the AI can get out of control. It feels like in the past year and a half, the exuberance over AI, which again, I'm exuberant. It's amazing what seems to be developing and the tools that we already have. But somehow the very real human concerns are being appreciated, but are being, well, we can't not move forward and fast because we need to prevail. And I think we see the role of some of the senior executives being eliminated or being diminished at, company after company. So, gosh, how does one stand in the face of, if we don't move and move fast and ignore risks, or just tell us how we're going to minimize them, we are losing fast.
Well, I think the AI example is really powerful, because I've been in the camp of people who think that if the AI governance duties are added to the privacy team, that's generally good news. I know that not everybody thinks that, oh my God, we have enough to do, and we simply don't have the bandwidth to deal with that. I think it's generally a gift, because it allows you to connect to a whole bunch of other things, different groups at the company, to connect to something that the company actually cares about. And then your messaging can be, well, there's an awful lot of uncertainty and ambiguity and new laws, and we can help guide you. So it helps with that value proposition. The issue of there might be societal downsides or downsides for the company, I think we should separate those things, because the societal downsides may not actually be downsides for the actual company. The company is going to have to set up appropriate governance programs to handle the AI and the legal obligations and things like that. And you still need to do that. I am concerned that the voice of organizations out there expressing concerns about AI is not quite loud enough, because there is an awful lot of pressure to be behind all the innovation. So I think it is very important to speak up. And I think you start with pushing for the appropriate governance mechanisms and protections within the organization, aligning to the hopes and dreams of the company. I have found that when I talk with senior privacy leaders and some of the challenges they have with AI, is that the company is trying to take on, different people at the company are trying to take on, oh, we have all these AI products here and there that we want to take on, and it's really hard to standardize the review, the negotiation, the contractual obligations, and things like that. And so some companies are going to have to get from the ad hoc approach to that sort of thing to standardizing in some way. And the argument will have to be that we, the company, can use AI more effectively if we start to standardize and build the requisite governance.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see, for instance, how much time is being chewed up in back and forth contractual issues where someone wants to put in a clause that their partner can't use our customer data for AI, and you send that over, and then the other side says, well, actually, we've been using machine learning to improve our products at your request for as long as we've had this contract. What exactly do you now mean that we can't use AI? Because we think we kind of can, according to the contract, and we think, frankly, we've been doing it, and we think that that's exactly what the businesses on each side of this discussion want. And then, people go back and forth and, maybe try to drill down on, okay, well, what new thing do I think is is happening. Nicholas points out that the turnover has been massive in the past number of years, and I guess that is fair. That there's been a lot of movement. Some of that is good, right? Movement is sometimes driven by the fact that there is new opportunities, better opportunities, and people are kind of finding new positions. With the economy currently in a bit of a uncertain position, obviously holding costs and limiting budgets makes life challenging. What are we seeing any of the people working in privacy getting any of the benefit yet from using AI? We certainly get lots of stories and hear directly from companies who are using AI to more quickly do assessments, to look for contract language, to draft templates, with all the caveats that there's not perfect, hallucinates, all that sort of thing. But I hear from a lot of major lawyers at major firms how much they're using AI. I've been amazed at how just recently, of course, we're all looking at the issues around a moratorium around state AI legislation, right, which might make life a little easier for some of the people who are worrying about chasing each state law and concerned that they're all creating a patchwork and that sort of thing. But the issue of whether or not Congress can create a moratorium, interesting legal issues, right? What are the constitutional issues? Is it a commandeering, under a court case that said that the states can't, the federal government can't just order states, but on the other hand, preemption, where Congress acts, and preempts a field by acting. Well, what's the difference there? And I started doing some research, and the amazing memo that the deep research enterprise version of ChatGPT did for me, and I had to read it carefully and look at the cases and so forth. But as I was sort of just searching around and looking for sources and articles and so on and so forth, in 9 minutes, it found many more sources than would have necessarily ranked in my search, and at least claimed that here's what they said, and then integrated them. And so wouldn't hand that on, but wow, it gave me an incredibly great starting point to then go ahead and dig into the issue. And so I think and just in the time it would have taken me to assign it to a junior person, a couple of days that it would have taken for them to get back to me, I had a great, amazing first deep dive that I now need to sort of go from. But wow, super useful. I don't know, is AI gonna relieve some of the stress for our folks?
I don't think it replaces us as privacy professionals. I think it can help us with some of the tasks. I think in companies where the privacy work or compliance work is routinized and pushed down, impact assessments, ROPAs, things like that. Sure, AI can help with that. AI can help with a quick assessment of something, maybe summarizing some new bill or something like that. But the fundamental work that privacy professionals have to do is getting out in their organization, understanding what the organization needs to do, and slowly, steadily, and persistently persuading people to do something that they really don't want to do, to make sure that the organization is positioned to have the appropriate governance for how the data is used, how the AI is used, to comply with laws and not hinder the company's progress toward innovation and whatever. That essential work, I don't think is going to be overtaken by AI anytime soon. And so the human elements of our jobs, I think, are where we need to excel. And that's why the whole reason I have a coaching practice specializing in privacy professionals, their teams, and their leaders is to help people with the human element of this work, to improve the capacity to get out in organizations, to develop a strategy for privacy and compliance, and figure out how you're going to go about that in an effective way. a couple of weeks ago at IAPP, Jocelyn Aqua and I did a panel about burnout among privacy professionals. And boy, there's something that probably causes some turnover among people in the privacy profession. It's pretty common. And we came up with a taxonomy of the different kinds of burnout that afflict privacy professionals. You can be exhausted, but that's not the same as feeling overwhelmed, which is not the same as feeling distracted, which is not the same as feeling just very frustrated. You can be on top of your game and performing effectively and blocked by inadequate decision-making at the organization, for example, which is completely different from feeling exhausted or overwhelmed, for example. The values clash that you mentioned at the top of our conversation, when that values gap between what you believe and what the organization seems to believe is too big, that wears people down too. So we came up with remedies, and the important thing about our remedies was that we had them for individuals and for teams and for leaders, and for individuals within themselves and in relation to their team, and for teams among themselves and in relation to their leader, and for leaders in relation to their team and within themselves and with their leaders. It's the nexus of those connections where the problems arise and where the real work needs to be done to advance a privacy strategy. And the way I always think of it is, you are getting very clear about where you are, and that's why we had the taxonomy of burnout, so you can understand what's really bothering you. You get clear about the outcome that you actually want, and the strategy part is connecting those things. The how are you going to do it? And we came up with a series of things for improved prioritization, for improving the capacity to extract clarity from the ambiguous laws or direction, to improve connecting with people across the organization, to reduce the distractions, and to ultimately find ways to take action and develop a plan. Because fundamentally, we can languish, we can just get smaller and not be effective, and the burnout will set in more deeply, or we can start to recharge ourselves, re-engage with the organization, stay connected to our purpose. I call it the REP, the rep, and you do your reps. It's an ongoing thing. It's a daily practice. Leaders have to get their teams to do it. Teams have to get their individuals to do it, etc. This is how we're going to change our profession, that we are part of the organization. We are not at odds with their goals, and we are helping guide them ultimately to their business objectives. And it's partly our job to understand what those business objectives are. So the human element is not going to be replaced by AI.
You know, there are people who work at companies that seem to, be regularly under fire for privacy misdeeds, or just they're at the edge of every policy debate and issue. And there are folks who've been working at some of those companies for a long time. And, I'd always wonder, I said, well, don't you feel burnt out? I mean, every week, you're being criticized for this or that, or you're in the middle of, this hard debate or really having to engage. And, what I've grown to understand is that what some of those companies do well in terms of being able to maintain, employees is, well, they pay them very well, right? That makes a big difference. But more than that, right? Because that's not what it's only all about. Those people really, have a good sense of the mission of their organization. They're constantly, being told, here's how we're changing the world. Here's how we're achieving all this good stuff. And they really work hard to, sell and communicate to their staff what the agenda of the company is in a broad way. They do a lot of work to support their teams. Their teams feel like teams. They do things together. They have social activities. They have nicknames. They celebrate, your anniversary at the company in some manner. They have employee, I don't know, do we get in trouble if we say diversity groups, but like groups where people feel like we're part of the veterans at, Walmart. And I have some affiliation where recruiting veterans or recognizing the need of veterans, or, whichever affiliation you have, is part of your role, and you look to, that helps fulfill you as like, hey, I'm a veteran. I care about recruiting veterans. I care about veterans being able to succeed. I understand their unique needs, and I'm here and that's part of my role. They support career development. They understand that there is a career and I can get ahead. Very often people feel burnt out because, well, no matter what I do, well, I'll just be here next year, right? Like there's nowhere for me to go. And so seeing sort of a career path, they invest in education. I'm getting a certification. They support them going to conferences, right? Not necessarily because, well, that's super useful, but you then, part of like, I'm part of this community of people who work in that space. And I think for all of us, even if you're not in the biggest company, there are some lessons there for the kinds of things that help give people the sort of psychic and emotional support that helps them feel. And it's all about, right, recognizing that you are valued for what you do at the organization, you have a career path, and that you have connections to people in your organization and in your broader community who understand you and the hard decisions that you are trying to make. Anyway, we're at 12:30. Thank you for sharing some of the thoughts. Those of you who want more executive coaching, contact Doug. Those of you who want to hear more about all the lovely things FPF does, contact me. And we hope you have a relaxing weekend where you do more than think about your career and your job, and you read something entertaining and interesting, because the world is a challenging place right now for us all, and we can all use a little bit of an escape, or at least spending time with friends and family. Thank you all. Have a great Friday, and see you every week. Next week, Arvind Narayanan, one of the phenomenal academics whose book right now in progress about AI as a normal technology. What does he mean by that? Arvind, really a creative thinker, and certainly appreciates the value of AI, as well as has some of the skepticism. His other book out already is called, AI Snake Oil, but he's not a person who doesn't think AI is enormously powerful. But here he's now telling us to think of it as normal technology, and let's learn a little bit more about what he means by that. We'll post links to some of his writing, and we hope you'll join us next Friday. Doug, have a great weekend.
Thank you, Jules. Thanks, everybody.